For the last, 4 or 5 years, I've been restoring the windows and the sash that are in the Mead building, which is a building that's on the HSC, the Human Services Center, the state hospital campus. And it's a big, grand building with, there's arched windows and a whole mess of rectangular windows. I think there's 230 some odd windows in the place. And from that, I have done some, I was just kind of documenting the work that I did on Instagram, and then from that documentation was contacted by a magazine called Fine Home Building, and that's what the article is from. But we did that actually at my house, just to try to get a more relatable and a more residential size. You know, the windows out at the Mead building are neat, but they're huge. You know, they're 5 feet wide, 9 feet high, big arch tops. They're not necessarily relatable. So we wanted to do an article on the on restoring the windows in the building. But to begin with, I brought a video. I know probably most of you don't necessarily know the Mead building, or me saying they're big and round. It doesn't really help. So I brought a video that shows some of the work that we did. I just pulled these off of my phone. I don't know, as memories or whatever, where you can just do like a video slide presentation. So this is about a 4.5 minute long video, and it'll give you an idea of some of the work that we did. All right. Well, as you can notice, there's a lot of finger pointing in the video, and I apologize. I take a lot of the videos myself, and in the videos I'm kind of explaining what it is that I'm doing. So yeah. So apologize for the finger pointing. And also in that video, it shows me doing a lot of rebuilding those sash. The arch tops that were in that building were not made all that well to begin with. They lasted 100 years, so I mean that's a relative thing. They lasted 100 years, but they didn't have joinery where on the arched pieces. They were toe-nailed with nails, and from that the wind had blown and they had rotted out and they had been repaired and replaced and cobbled together. They had plywood over them. There just wasn't anything that I could save of those sash. So we tried to replicate them to look exactly like they did before, but make them with the joinery so that they'll last a decent amount of time and hopefully hold up to the wind. Also, we made storm sash that are on the exterior, so that whole building now has storm sash on it, which it didn't have to begin with. It's a different time and it's a different use. When that building was first built, it was part of the campus, and then you had the tunnel system. It all went to a power plant. There's a coal-fired power plant. They had a rail spur that came there. They had an infinite amount of heat that came via the tunnels to heat the place, so they weren't as concerned with energy efficiency. But now they're changing it into the Dakota Territory Museum, so it's a real concern, both heating and cooling and climate control, so you're not having big changes in humidity levels. So they wanted to restore the windows that were there, but have the energy efficiency, or try to have the energy efficiency. So that's where we ended up putting the storm sash on the outside. So we had to make storm sash for all of them, but the majority of the windows in the building we restored. We didn't, I didn't just throw them out and make new ones. We tried to save everything that we could, and it's one of the beauties of traditional sash making, like the way that the windows were made to begin with. They're not glued together. They're through mortise and tenon joinery, and then they have what's called a sash pin, which is basically a headless nail that's driven in. There's one on the top, there's two on the bottom. They're driven into that tenon, so they peg the tenon. Well, by doing that, you can, when you scrape the paint off of those, and we can get into that later here, talking about steam box and getting the glazing off and getting the glass out and all that business. But by driving that, by scraping the paint off, you can see the little white spot where the nails are, and then you can drive those nails out with a straight-sided punch. Not a tapered punch, but a straight-sided, 1/8 inch or what have you. And you can drive those pins down till they poke out the bottom. Usually you put a 2x4 down. You set those on top. You drive them down into the 2x4 until the 2x4 kind of sticks. Then you pop the 2x4 off, and then you can grab with a pair of vice grips that pin and pull it out. And when you do that, now you can take that joint apart. And then you can just replace the pieces that need to be replaced or do repairs. Usually, well, almost always, it's the low horizontal of either the upper sash or the lower sash. That's what's rotted. The water comes down, the glazing's off, it sits on that ledge, it starts to eat a hole, and then just more water goes in, and eventually it rots out that lower horizontal, that lower rail. And if it gets real bad, it'll rot out the bottom of the stiles too. And in that case, then the only thing you've got to save is that top piece. But usually you can just replace the bottom rail on the windows, either the upper or lower sash. So in the video, it looks like I'm making a bunch of windows. That's just because that's the videos that I had on my phone from the last, 2 years, which is what we spent. We spent a lot of time on those, and then also that was some of the stuff that was a little more interesting to do, a little bit more interesting to show than just the rectangular ones. But we did do a lot of repair to the original. Tried to save everything we could. It's a museum, but the building sat vacant, I think, since 1981. So you can imagine what kind of condition things were in. And just because it's sat vacant since 81, they took it offline years before that. You know, how municipal buildings, how that works. They're not going to put money into something that they know they're going to not use any longer. And sometimes it becomes this clandestine destiny where, you know, you kind of prove that you need a new building by letting the building go to heck. So, that being said, so that's kind of what I worked on. But I thought something to be more relatable would be like residential windows. Those windows are, you know, the windows on the Me building are huge. So for the article, we decided that we'd try to do some residential ones. It's more relatable. And so we did them. We actually did them on my house. We've got a 1920s bungalow home. So thought that it would be a good way to show. I had access to it, so we could show. So that's what the handout is. And so I'll kind of go through the article here, and we can talk about a few things, and then hopefully that video, you know, if you have questions, we'll certainly do those at the end about the bead building or anything that comes up about the article. But to begin with, let's see if I can figure out how to make this thing work. I'm just doing glazing on this. This is just just a pretty picture more than anything. To begin with, I mean, the first part with window restoration is figuring out how to get the windows out. And that it's a pretty basic, it's pretty easy to do, but it's not, there's a number of tricks that go along with it that make it a lot easier. If you just go there and try to take the window out, a lot of times things kind of get broken up. But there's somewhat of a method to it. Let's see if I can get this laser pointer to work. That first image I'm showing taking off the interior stop. That's the piece. It's held on by nails. Showing a trick there where you're using basically two pry bars so that you're not marring things up. Pulling that, prying that open. First thing that you need to do is usually score with a putty, or not a putty knife, a utility knife, the paint, so you can get a clean separation, so you're not yanking paint off of one side or another. You need to get that interior stop off so that you can get the lower sash, which is that one right there, so you can get that one out. That's all you have to do to get that one out. You pull those, the interior stop, pull that off, and then you can get the window out. There's ropes that hang down that are attached to weights that are inside the elevator boxes that are on either side. There's just a knot. There's a hole drilled in the side. You can just pull the knot and it'll just come loose, and then leave the ropes hang in place. Also, with these, with those interior stops, it's also good to label them as you take them apart. Here you can see I'm taking that rope out there. There's a channel along the side. There's a drilled hole that the knot goes in, and the channel is what the rope tracks on when it's in its I don't know what the heck that's called. This, you've got the pulley there, and then this race area where the lower sash can move up and down. The upper sash, this is the one that's kind of the one that causes problems. This lower sash, that's pretty easy and straightforward to get out. The upper one is a challenge, and usually they're painted shut. Almost always they're painted shut. They're supposed to be able to move. They're supposed to be able to come down. You're supposed to be able to move the lower one up and the top one down. That's where you hear the term double hung. And it's actually a really efficient way to do it. If you can pull the top down and the bottom up, and you can get airflow, you'll get a circular airflow. From hot air rising, warmer air is on top, cooler air is on the bottom. But it does help to be able to do that. You don't see that as much anymore. Now it's just always the bottom window comes up. The upper sash, like I said, that one's always painted shut. So one of the tricks that we came up with, and man, this is a really good trick that I'm pretty proud of. These clamps, you can get them. They're made by Irwin. Now you can also get them from DeWalt. They're the heavy duty version of quick clamps. Okay, but they can be reversed, so they can be flipped over. So what you end up doing is you end up putting the top of those against the top of the casement, and then the two of them as close to the outer edge on the lower rail as you can get. You don't want to put it in the middle because then you'll bow that rail. You want to try to get it all the way out. You got to be a little careful because on most residential windows, that joint right there is usually just a bridle joint. So really the only thing that is holding those are those sash pins. So you want to be kind of careful. And you do want to score on the outside and on the inside with a utility knife. But if you score on the inside and the outside, usually you can pump those clamps, so you're squeezing them, and they're gonna pop that thing loose, which is why I'm kind of proud of it, because it works really well and it's pretty gentle, and it's a lot better than going in there with a hammer and a block and smacking those things down, which is kind of the standard way of doing that. But yeah, these clamps really that works great. Once you get it loose, now it's a matter of driving that thing all the way down to the bottom. And the reason that you've got to drive it all the way down to the bottom is because you need to get what's called the parting stop. That's the wooden piece that's between the two windows. Let's see, it's right there. Pardon my shake. It's a 1/2 inch wide piece by about 3/4, and it sits into the parting stop groove, and it's just pushed in there. It's not mechanically fastened. It's just a pressure fit, and usually you can grab a hold of that with a pair of duckbill vice grips. You can grab onto that and pull it to get it out. But you have to get that upper sash all the way down to the bottom of the casement so you can pull it out and then lift it up. I don't know if any of that makes sense or not. But that window has to get all the way down, because at the meeting rail or the check rail, it doesn't really show up in these necessarily in this drawing, but that piece has an angle on it so that the lower rail and the lower sash and the upper sash, so they come together. They're going to come together like this, and then you got the sash lock that squeezes it. Okay, well that piece, this one, on the upper sash, that gets in the way, because by having these two pieces at an angle, they take up the space that's between the two windows. You can't have the two windows right on top of each other. There's a 1/2 inch space between there, and that takes it up. The lower sash, it just comes out because it's not trapped by anything. But that parting stop, you can't get that thing out because of that check rail. So that's why you have to get it all the way down to the bottom and then pull it out. So you're going to have to bend it and pull it out. And I think I'm kind of showing that here, I think, if I remember right. But yeah, that's, like I said, half the battle is just getting the sash out to begin with. We'll go on to the next page. I think this is the center of the magazine, so it's so the photo looks a little odd. This is a makeshift steam box. All right, so it's basically foil-faced insulation with a wooden framework around it. There's a door that's hinged. I've got some conduit, metal conduit in there. There's some copper that the sash sits on. I'll show at the end here. We'll show a video of what it does. As it comes out. Mainly what I'm doing with it is, and I guess I should explain it a little bit more. The sash are going to go into that, and the door gets closed, and then I heat it with a turkey fryer and a red gas can that does not have gasoline in it. And it was a new gas can. It started off. That's basically a tea kettle. So we fill that up with water, and I've got a radiator hose run to it, and there's tubing in the back, and that's going to release steam. It's fired by that propane tank right there, and it's going to, once the door gets closed, the window goes in, it's going to heat that sash up to 200 degrees boiling point for the most part, and it's going to loosen all of the glazing. That's what I'm after. That glazing is rock hard, and you can't get that stuff out really any other way unless it's just so badly crumbled that it just falls out. But by heating it for about 45 minutes, it just softens it right up and it comes right out. The other thing that it does is that it heats the whole sash. It heats it all up evenly, which is important for the glass itself. Because if you use a heat gun, so you can maybe heat the glazing and possibly remove it with a heat gun, but what happens is that you thermally shock the glass. You end up heating it, like a corner usually is the susceptible one. You heat the corner of the glass, there's that slight expansion from heating, and it breaks it. So by using the steam box, it brings all the glass up evenly in temperature, and then when you take it out, it all goes down evenly in temperature. And that then preserves that glass and that's advantageous for a number of reasons. One, it's you don't have to buy any more glass. You can reuse the stuff that you've got. So there's an economic efficiency to it. But then also it's the historic glass, so it has these imperfections in it. There's wave to it. There's air bubbles. There's just different things that, as you look out the window, you don't necessarily pick up on it. You don't necessarily know, oh, that's old glass or what have you. But for some reason, it looks right. If you have if you're looking for it, it's easy to spot. But just in your house or at some older home, it just, for some reason, it just looks right. And what it is it's the distortion. You'll see, it won't be like crazy funhouse, distortion, but it has a wave to it. And I think at the end of that video of the Mead building, I was showing that in this center arch. I rebuilt those windows, but we used the glass from the building. We tried to use the antique glass. So that's another advantage of the steam box. So it's getting the glazing soft. 2, we're able to reuse the glass, and 3, it bubbles all the paint up. Don't necessarily go after the paint at that time because it's wet and the wood fibers are easily frayed. So we usually let that dry for a day, and then we'll go back in and scrape that. And scraping paint, it's lead paint. It almost always is lead paint. If you're doing this for yourself, you can do it no problem. I mean, if it's your own home, you can basically kind of do what you want. If you're hiring contractors to do this, they should be RRP. I think that's what it is. RRP, removal, restoration, and paint. Lead compliance. and playing along with those rules. That was another reason for us doing this article of me doing it at our house, is that by doing it at my house, we didn't necessarily have to do the full thing on lead compliance. Otherwise, that's all the article would be about, would be lead compliance. So that was another reason for doing it at our house. We still tried to follow, it's good practice to follow those regulations. But it's different from a contracting point of view, and then if you have children involved, and yeah, that could be a whole other topic. We'll just stick to the restoration. So that's the steam box. There's the, let's see, that's the rest of the images. Here you can see the glazing, removing that, cleaning glass. And here it's scraping down paint. So you can see we tried to do a number of things. One, we're outside. I've got a plastic area underneath. There's a 2x4 framework underneath where I'm working. Tyvek suit. Let's see, what the heck is that called? A NIOSH 100? I think that's right. 100 mask. That's the mask that's for lead compliance. And then I think down here at the bottom, we're talking a little bit about epoxy repair. So there's weather checking. I'm digging those weather checks out, and we're going to use a product called, it's made by Abatron. It's liquid wood and wood epox. They're kind of the industry standards as far as epoxy work to fix minor repairs. Not like, it's not the best practice to like do a whole coroner in this stuff, but for weather checking and that kind of thing, it's a good way to fix minor problems. Let's see. Yeah, here's the liquid wood is going on. It's basically both of these. This is the product right here. Abatron liquid wood and wood epox. Basically, the liquid wood is the liquid, and that's going to penetrate into the wood. So basically, think of that as the adhesive. Okay, and then wood epox it's also a two-part. Both of these are two-part products. You're going to mix them beforehand and then put them on. They're epoxies, but the wood epox is a putty, and it's a kind of a lightweight putty, and that is what fills. So usually you're putting that on with like a putty knife, trying to push it into those voids. So the liquid is the adhesive that glues the putty to the wood. I don't know if that totally makes sense, but that's the way the product works. Once it cures out for it's usually the next day, then you can go in and you can sand and smooth everything, and paint and do whatever you need to do. And there I'm sanding there. Another thing, these scrapers, they're made by Bako, which is a Swedish company, and they're the best scrapers out there. They work fantastic. The carbide on those, they come in different sizes. This handle right here only comes with a triangle, and then you have to buy these things separately, but they don't come with the handle. So you can either you can buy these individually, or I end up buying a number of these with the triangle, and then just end up putting those on. So I've got a little arsenal of them, and then just a 2-inch scraper. Again, they're carbide, but there's differences in carbides, and these are fantastic. Basically, it's the small particles that make up the carbide. The smaller the particle is, the better the carbide's going to be, because if they're made up of kind of larger chunks, those larger chunks are nice and hard, but when they break off, they dull quickly. And these, they just do a fantastic job. I don't know if you can get them anywhere. I always get them. I get them on Amazon, or you can get them from some of the woodworking magazines, Lee Valley or Hartville Tool or whatever. But I haven't been able to find, at least down in Yankton, I haven't been able to find a local source. But yeah, it's, I guess, one of the things that Amazon is good for. All right. Now we've got the sash is out. It's been through the box, the steam box. It's been repaired, scraped, sanded, and here it's painted with oil-based primer. Usually you're going to use an oil-based primer. You can top coat with anything. You can top coat with latex. You can top coat with oil base. You can top coat with linseed oil, all back. Paint that's if you want to get really, really historically accurate, you can do a linseed oil paint. But to begin with, an oil-based primer seems to work the best. Basically, because you can then top coat it with anything. If you go with a latex-based primer, you're going to be doing latex from then on. The rule is everything can. Let's see. You can go with latex over oil, but you can't go with oil over latex. So here we've got, it's all primed, sanded up, and we're putting glass back in. I've put a bed of glazing compound in this piece, and then dropping the glass in. There's something, it shows up here. And all right, the glazing compound is, the stuff that I use is from Sarco. It comes in two different kinds. It's made in Chicago. It's either type M, which is stuff that can cure, if you're going to have the windows and they're going to cure inside. So they've got to sit and kind of skin over before you can paint them. The type M has some dryers in it that will cause it to skin over a little bit quicker and allow you, if you're going to have them sit inside, to kind of dry. But the dryers will cause problems if you set them outside to dry. Like if you glaze the windows and then put them back in, the dryers can cause cracking because it wants to dry that glazing a little bit too quick. So if that's the case, then you would use dual glaze. I think that's, yeah, type M and dual glaze. And dual glaze is just regular old glazing compound. And all glazing compound is, it's chalk and linseed oil. I mean, that's basically the two things. And whiting is chalk. Calcium carbonate is what whiting is, and that's chalk. So I don't necessarily use whiting. We use whiting. It helps to clean off the glass and that kind of thing, and add to the linseed or add to the glazing compound if it's a little sticky. You can add that to it to make it more. It's like making bread. You don't want it necessarily to come off on your hands, but you want it to be good and malleable. So you can add chalk to it. Like I said, that's what whiting is. But I don't necessarily use whiting. I use athletic field marker. You can get it from the hardware store, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper. You can get a big bag of it for $20, where you can get a small little pint-sized container of whiting for about $20. But they're basically the same thing. Setting glass in here, and like I said, it's in a bed. So there's on the glazing rabbet, which is a little wooden ledge that the glass sits on. I've put glazing compound on there. And on these small windows, it's easy enough to do it by hand. You just pack that, pack the glazing rabbet just by pushing the glazing compound on it. In the video before, I think you maybe saw where I was using an electric or a cordless caulk gun. And that's what we were doing on that. It's just basically to bed the glass. That way it's sealed on the inside. It takes up any imperfections of the glazing rabbet, and it stops the glass from rattling once you glaze it. So that gets set on, and then there's a real good trick here of using a sander. So like a quarter sheet, just not a dual action, not a disc that spins, but just the old-fashioned electric sander that is like a third sheet or a quarter sheet. Doesn't have any sandpaper on it. It has a piece of flannel shirt wrapped around it, and basically that's just being used as to vibrate the glass and smoosh the glazing compound down. You just want a real thin layer on the bottom side, so that just vibrates and purges out the excess material. And then a glazing point gun. That's a vintage one. Those are the best ones. If you have a bunch of sash to do, that's a great thing to invest in. If you don't have a bunch of sash to do, it's probably not worth it. You can just get the glazing points and you can push them in with with a putty knife, what have you. And what the glazing points do, they're basically like little diamonds, and they get pushed into the wood. And the reason for those is that's what keeps the glass in. Those glazing points go in. You've got the glazing compound, and the glazing compound is to weather tight it, but it doesn't have adhesive qualities to it. It'll stick to the window in that and stick good enough to stay there, but it won't necessarily hold the window in. So you need to have the glazing point so that the sash won't fall out, if that makes sense. And the glazing is on the outside of the window. And then on here, we're just going through a couple of different steps of glazing, a couple of tricks. I've got a video or two here at the end. One of them shows a little bit of glazing. And I think that's it for that article. Once the glazing's on, they're going to sit for. Sarco recommends 2 weeks. That always seems too long to me. I basically go until I feel comfortable where I can top coat them with paint, and usually 2 coats of either an exterior latex or an exterior oil, depending on what it is that you want to use. And then reinstalling, and you just basically you do things in reverse. You put the upper sash in, you put the parting stops in, you put the lower sash in, and then you put the interior stop. And that's basically the sash restoration. And then you can also add a storm window. I've got another article that I'm supposed to do. They're supposed to come back out sometime this summer, and we're supposed to do that if I can find some time to do that. And those are, that basically there's on the outside of your window there's a brick mold on traditional windows. That brick mold is 1 1/8 inch thick, and that's how thick your storm sash are. And they're just basically a full sheet of usually you've got a top rail, bottom rail, the 2 styles, and then the mid rail matches the check rail that's on your sash. So that's one of the nice things about being able to do like custom storm windows is that you can make everything line up. Otherwise, if you're doing the store-bought windows or the aluminums or what have you, you're kind of stuck with where the manufacturer makes them. So, but I thought this article had there's a couple of videos that went along with it that they shot at the same time, and I think we'll show those next. It'll show the steam box. It'll show. It'll also show how I close those windows out. When you take the sash out, you got to put something in. So it shows the way that we plywood those up, and I can try to explain that a little bit after the video, but at least it'll give you a reference. So let's start with I don't know if the one that with the enclosing does that. I don't know how they're labeled. I'm sorry.
Sash repair can take a few weeks to complete, mostly because there's a lot of waiting for primer, glazing, and paint to dry. In the meantime, you'll need to close the window opening to protect the house from the weather. In this video, Ben Brunick shows us his method, which starts with OSB strips inserted into the parting bead dado. The beauty of this system is how secure it is without driving any screws into the window frame.
I wanted to show how we close windows up without like putting any screws or anything into the opening. And the way that that's done is when we took the sash, the upper and lower sash out, we took the parting stop out. And the parting stop has got a half-inch groove here. And this is 7/16 inch OSB. And it's going to fit right into that groove. And by having a small piece on this side and then a small piece here on the other side, those are tied into the groove. And then we've got a piece of plywood here that will close up the opening. And we're going to run screws here, four points. And by tying that together, it'll be tied in here and tied in here, and it won't come out. I've pre-drilled these holes so that when you put the screw in, you're not going to end up bridging. It's going to suck that piece to this piece. And we'll put that in, and then so that you don't push this piece out, you just use a little wonder bar, and you can hook. You can hook that piece that's in the groove, and back it up, and then that'll allow you to. That allows that screw to then catch the OSB. Okay, and now you're secured, and now you can work on the outside and do all the scraping, and it's not going to blow in, and then overnight, we're fine.
All right, so that just is a way that you can secure those windows. If you have storms on the outside, you don't have to do that. You can just leave the storms on. But by having that plywood on, it does allow you to then scrape and paint the exterior without having to take the thing, take your storm off, put it back on. It's just, you've got 4 screws, you take it out, you put it on. And it's just a nice way to secure everything. It does make, the room dark, and neighbors might not necessarily like having OSB for long periods of time, but it does work really well. That system works great. So this next video is going to be the steam box, and it'll show how the glazing, how that works, and give an explanation.
First step to restoring a window sash is removing the old glazing putty so you can take the glass out of the sash. In this video, Ben Brunick shows us how he uses a homemade steam box to soften the putty, which allows him to more easily remove the glass without breaking it.
I want to put them in so that the glass is up. So, you don't want to put them in this way, because if for some reason the glazing were to let loose and there weren't points, the glass would fall out. So glass up, and then just slide them into place. The 2 of them. And we'll close it up. And we'll let them cook for, once the steam starts generating, we'll let them cook for, 45 minutes, an hour.
Stand back when first opening the door and let the steam clear. Wear gloves with thermal protection, like Ben's ThermaFit gloves from Atlas. Quickly move the sash to a flat work surface. Use a putty knife to scrape away the old glazing. Before attempting to remove the glass, look around and make sure all the glazing points are out of the sash. If the putty knife didn't get them out, use a screwdriver or pliers to pry or pull them. Lift the glass from underneath and carefully set it aside. Continue to remove all the glazing from the sash, but let the sash dry for about 24 hours before beginning to scrape paint. The steam box will soften the paint, but it also moisturizes the wood, which makes it more susceptible to damage from the scraping tools.
All right, well, in that I say the glass up, and I should have said the glazing side up. Like I said, there's a little wood rabbet that the glass sits on, and you want that to be on the bottom side. I'm sure that probably makes more sense than saying glass up. So I think we've got, is there one more? There's one more video here.
In this video, Ben Brunick shows us how to apply glazing putty as the final step of restoring the window sash for his 1920s bungalow. You may be surprised how simple the work is. One of Ben's best tips, know when to stop.
Now we're doing the actual glazing, and I'm going to show running this and then doing this corner. The corners are kind of the tricky spot. To begin with, I'm just going to pack this and kind of set up what it is that I want to have it looking like at the end. It's going to be smooth, but I'm trying to get it set up as well as I can to its final shape. So we'll just pack this in to begin with.
Tool the glazing from the top of the glazing dado to pitch away from the glass. If you go higher than the top of the dado, the glazing will be visible from inside the house. If you are too far below the top of the dado, there won't be adequate pitch.
So now I'll come back here and I'll set up, I'll put some putty on that side of the blade. So now I'll come over to this. The corners are kind of the tricky part. Again, get a little bit on, it's going to be on that side of the blade. I'm going to pack that in. And then you want to 45 the corners. Oh, I'm making a mess here.
Though the glazing technique doesn't change, it's important to work in this specific order. Place the sash upside down and glaze the top of each pane first. Turn the sash sideways to glaze both sides of each pane. Finally, turn the sash right side up and glaze the bottom of each pane. Allow the glazing to set up for about 2 weeks before painting, and wax the sides of the sash before reinstalling them.
All right, so what he's talking about there with like the top side and the bottom is when you, I like to glaze right here instead of trying to do this and trying to do this and trying to do the top. I like to just do this and then rotate the window. But by doing that, like I said, the glazing doesn't necessarily have much for adhesive qualities. So if that glass is a little loose in the opening, you want to start with the window basically upside down, do the what would be the top, and then turn it and do the sides, and then have it flipped the correct direction that it's going to sit in the window and do the bottom. That's going to, what that does is if that window is going to move at all, it's not going to mess up the glazing that you spent time trying to tool. And then once it's glazed, if you're going to need to set it off someplace, lean it up against a wall or whatever. You want to keep that in that direction the rest of the time, until that stuff gets somewhat hard. But for the most part, it's just good practice just to leave it in that position, and then you can paint it and put the thing back in. But that'll keep that glass from kind of moving around. That's a classic problem for wrinkling the glazing compound. You spend a good amount of time trying to get that nice and smooth and looking right, and then if you move that thing around, it boogers up on you and frustrates you. And the glazing there, we were showing that, doing it by hand, and that's how we do it. But on the larger windows, again, I had that cordless caulk gun that we would fill full of glazing compound, and we would use it to put the glazing on. It just speed things up, but didn't really work for this article. I'm not going to tell people to go get a cordless caulk gun and fill it full of glazing compound. But yeah, that's basically the article and kind of how you do do restoration on the windows. So I think it'd probably be a good time to do questions, and I'll maybe try to stop talking and fumbling around here for a little while.
And people that have questions, I've got a microphone, so if you want.
Ben, that was hugely interesting. Thank you. I have a question, though. For example, in the picture, there's 3 different panes in that. In my house, I've got 9 or 12. As you replace the glass and glaze it and all of that, is there a technique? Can you do all of them at the same time, or do you need to do one row, or do you need to do each pane in the sash individually? Each pane, each little piece of glass within a sash?
Usually, you're gonna put all the glass in. You know, it's going to be laying flat on the table. You're going to put the glazing on that glazing rabbet, and you're going to set all the glass in, and you're going to, you can push them in, or if you use that sander trick, that's a good way to get them set in, and then use the glazing points. Once the glazing points are in, you can move that sash around, and the glass isn't going to fall out. And then you can, I set it up on an easel. I've got this wooden easel that you see in the article, but a really good way to make an easel is that doesn't really cost anything, is you can use an A-frame ladder, okay? So if you have an A-frame ladder and you have a couple of those quick grip clamps, you can put a board across the A-frame ladder and use those quick grip clamps to clamp the board on, and there you've got an easel. That's a quick way. We should have shown that in this article. It was just something that we did that out at the building, but we had made these wooden easels and we had them, so we thought, well, we'll just use them. But it was dumb because I ended up having to take them to my house, and that was a big hassle. We could have just thrown up an A-frame ladder, and it would have been a lot more relatable to people also. But if you've got like a 9 light, so let's say it's a 3 over 3, okay? You would have those in, and you can then do the same technique where you glaze, have the thing upside down, glaze all the tops, turn them, glaze all the sides, just keep rotating. But again, you want to finish in the position that the window's going to be in, just so that they're not going to shift around. The smaller lights, they're not going to shift as much as maybe some of the bigger ones do. I don't know if that's necessarily true or not. More than anything, if you've got like a multi-light, like a 9 light, is when you take them out, try to keep them in order. So when they go back in, try to keep them in order, because they are different. They are. And so when you're putting that glazing on and you're setting that glass to begin with, where you set it on and you use the sander, a really good thing to do before you do that is to make sure that all of them fit in their holes before you put the glazing compound on, because inevitably if you don't do that, you'll end up and they won't fit, and then you have glazing on them, and then you're cleaning that off, and you're trying to score and break a small amount of glass off, because a lot of the times when you have the sash out, sometimes they kind of have a little bit of racking to them. So a lot of the times what we'll do is we'll just reclamp them and repin them. We don't take the old pins out, but we put a new pin in, and it'll just tighten everything up, so that you don't have that, you don't have this loosey-goosey sash. But by doing that, a lot of times you make things a little bit smaller, and then you have to do some work to the glass, and that usually is just scoring along the edge and then breaking a small amount off, and then you can use a belt sander that has an a sanding belt on it that's made for glass that takes off a small amount, but usually you just have to score it, and that's not that much fun to do, but is what it is.
Hi, I have a couple questions. My husband and I have been doing our windows. We've done 2 so far in our house, and I have to say we just did it, we just decided to take our time and just figure it out step by step. And we did it, but it was tricky the first one, but this has helped because it's given me some tips that'll make it go faster and,
Sure.
and easier. But I was wondering, for someone who wanted to hire someone to redo their windows, what is your estimated cost, what it would cost someone to fix a, I know it can't be specific or exact, but just try, I'm also on the board of preservation, so we deal with people that are wanting to replace their windows, and we try and push, fixing them and, or having someone fix them, and there's always the cost, what does it cost to fix them versus just buy a new one?
Yeah, and that's an issue. You've got replacement, so you've got replacement windows, which are really easy to get a cost estimate from. It's a lot more difficult to get a cost estimate if you can find somebody that will actually do it, to do restoration. And people are leery, rightfully so, of giving numbers because a lot of the times you don't know everything. And you don't know it until you open it up. And then you open it up and, oh boy, this is a real problem. So, trying to think, I run into this all the time because it's because I get asked, what's it going to cost, and it's one of the things that I've been leery of is trying to figure out costs. You try to break it down into an hourly. So if you figure you can do, I don't know, if you can do a sash, in 8 hours. I don't know. I mean, you're going to be doing more than one, but it's going to be it's time consuming. That's just all there is to it. And I don't necessarily know that it's probably pretty comparable to the cost of replacement windows.
Of a wood replacement window or of a vinyl?
Well, it's not going to be
Or
as
a
cheap as a
composite.
vinyl window is probably,
Yeah.
but it's going to be probably pretty comparable to a wood window. There are advantages to it. One, you're not filling the landfill full of windows. Two, they're going to look historically accurate because they are historically accurate, and they're repairable. That's a big thing to them, where the replacements, that's the old saying that the restoration people do is that replacements are just exactly that. They're replacements, and you're going to replace them over and over and over because the thermal pane that fails, and then you get fogged window, and they're not repairable, so you have to throw them out and you have to replace them again. Where with the single panes, I know they're not energy efficient wise as the doubles are, but when you put a storm on the outside, you get the efficiency. And there are some manufacturers now that are making a glass that's a thinner, that's thermally pane, that allows you to do that. But I would guess a normal residential, you're probably, by the time you get all said and done, you're probably at about 8 hours per window. So then take that times whatever the hourly rate is, which I don't know what the going rate. I don't know what the going rate in Sioux Falls is. If it's $50, if it's $75, if it's $100, I don't know.
So it could be $400 a window or $500.
Oh yeah, it could be $400 a window.
We
real
just put
real
in
quick.
some nice wood, top of the line windows in a property we own. 2 of them was all we needed to do, but I think it was, they were like $700 each, or
Yeah.
even close. They were maybe even $1,000 each. They were big windows. We got top of the line. So.
Yeah,
you
and
know,
I'm
you
and
can
I'm
spend a
talking
lot.
I'm talking about like these.
Right.
These are a smaller, and there's a bank of 3, so that's right there. If $400 was the estimate, you're looking at $1,200 for that bank of 3, and that's just going to be the window itself. That's not going to be a storm on the outside. That's going to be an additional cost along with it. So if you do it yourself, it's very economically viable. If you're paying somebody else, there's just no two ways about it. There's a good amount of labor involved. And there's just not a lot of people that are willing to take that on. And so, and you got to be mobile. You got to be able to go to site. You got to be on site. You got to have your windows out. They're going to be plywooded up for a period of time. It's not an instantaneous bang bang thing like replacements are. But there's advantages to the restoration of it. But I'm not going to be here to try to convince you one direction or another. Basically, I wanted to show like what it is that I did on that building, what we did with the magazine article, and then with that information, then you can make decisions that are educated.
So I have a couple questions. One is, we don't have too many contractors in Sioux Falls that offer this kind of work. So I'm wondering if you have ever done, say, a hands-on, all-day type of workshop, where in our case with the Board of Preservation, that maybe we could hire you for a day to take a window, say at somebody like Rachel's house, to show us how to restore it, and have, people there to be able to watch, listen, and learn. Is that possible?
Sure, at some point that's certainly possible.
I know you're really busy.
Yeah, that's the issue that I've got right now. I just built a new shop in Yankton, and I've been working on doors. So I build doors also. So I've got 7 quarter-sawn white oak doors that I've got for a congregational church in town it's a historic project. Beautiful, beautiful church. They're renovating. Took all the stained glass out, but my job is the doors, and I need to get them done because they.
So maybe we could schedule you for next summer or
Yeah,
spring or something.
yeah, sure,
So,
sure.
okay.
And then, like I said, I've got another article with Fine Home Building that's going to be on storm windows. So hopefully we can get that done. I'm kind of in the same boat with them where they've been asking when can we come out, and I answer it about as well as I answer it here.
And for everybody here, we are videotaping, so we'll have that on the SiouxFalls.org website on Board of Preservation, so you'll have access to that as well as those videos that Ben showed us today too. My other question is regarding the Mead building. How many windows were on that, and how long did it take you to repair or replace all of those?
I think there's about 230, 240 windows. And they're not all complete, they're not all done yet. They've all been, the storm windows have been made for everything. There was questions as far as some of the windows and whether or not, some of them are shot. There's a back side of the building that's a north side that's inside. There's 2 wings that go back, and there's a bunch of windows on that wall, but a number of those windows are being filled in. There's an elevator that's going up there, and it's a north-facing, never gets sun, is always in shadow, and there's a flat roof that's up above it. I think what they've decided to do with some of those is to do, and also the windows are completely rotted out. I mean, casement, window, everything, it's gone. There's just nothing but a hole in the stonework. And so they've decided to do replacements there instead of rebuilding. And I think they're going with I think they're a metal clad with wood on the interior, I believe is the case. It just has to do with their location on the building. It's on the back side of the building, but like I said, it doesn't receive any sun, and there's been moisture issues back there. There's going to be an elevator there, so there's a number of those windows that are not going to be done.